So I've been getting a lot of messages around one Switch controller in particular, and that is the Fusion controller from PowerA. And the reason for that, I think anyway, is the current price tag on it. This controller here is going at an MSRP of $100, which makes it $30 to $40 more than the current first-party Nintendo Switch Pro controller. And a lot of people are wondering, does that mean that this is higher quality? Is there some really cool functionality to it that we're missing out on with the first-party controller? Well, I did pick one of these up. I got it on Amazon and it came like a day or two later, but we had E3, so I was kind of busy with all of that. However, now I have some time and I figured we would go ahead and open this up, take a look inside of the controller, all of that, and see if it really is worth that $100 price tag. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. If you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Now we're gonna start by taking a look around the packaging and the box that it comes in, which, by the way, first of all, if you go into a store and pick this up, it has some weight to it. They used thicker cardboard, all of that in an attempt to make it feel like it is a quality product that is inside, because again, you're gonna see that $99.99, sticker right next to it. So you wanna at least have some sort of way of conveying to the customer that this isn't like the cheap old $25 controller and its flimsy packaging. We see Fusion by PowerA. They talk about the mappable Pro Pack that sits on the back and has macro buttons, similar to what we see on the Xbox Elite controller. We see the official seal of quality here from Nintendo. We'll flip it over and there's a ton of information on the back. Again, trying to sell you on all the extra features that they have. And they really go in depth. They have anti-friction rings around where the thumbsticks are, extra tall thumbsticks that come with it, a USB-C charge port, soft touch finish. There are two different faceplates. The idea here is the faceplate can be popped off and another one can be dropped on there for customization. As far as I can tell, they just have the two that comes with it. So like a white and a black. I don't know if they have other ones on their website. I didn't see anything like that. And then we have a 3.5 millimeter audio jack. You can plug in a set of headphones, for example, or I guess a headset, but this will have to be wired to the system. So keep that in mind. It will not function through the wireless connection. All right, now we get to slide this guy off here, and presentation right away is good. I've seen this with several of the higher end controllers where they have it in this like nice soft touch case right here. It does look like we have kind of a set of instructions inside of some cardboard with Fusion right on the front there. Let's see, it's just, okay, so that's just for the manual. Otherwise, though, it looks like everything is in here. There's nothing else left in the cardboard or the plastics. It's kind of that soft touch kind of casing. I've usually, like I said, see this with a lot of the more expensive controllers. Just a way for you to kind of store your premium controller away. Opening this up, immediately we have, looks like, kind of some closed cell foam there to go around the thumbstick. So they did at least think quite a bit about the packaging for the controller, just to give you a really good first impression as you're unboxing it. It sounds strange, but that is very important when you're kind of opening it up, just so that there is some thought put into how they packaged and put everything together. You figure, I guess that translates over to the controller itself. Let's see, we have our other faceplate up here. Looks like it's held on with magnets. You can see several of them actually around here. So this should actually be pretty easy to swap in and out. We do have a USB type A to C. It is kind of one of those braided cables, which are nice because they don't tangle up like some of the thinner, lower quality ones. That's a good cable to throw in there. Looks like we also have a piece here. I believe that's for the mappable buttons on the back. And then a couple of thumbsticks. I believe there are two different kind of textures on top, one being more of a dome texture and the other one kind of being indented there. And then our separate faceplate here has like the kind of the orangish red accents around where the thumbsticks are. And with all that, we can take a look at our controller here. It immediately does feel higher quality than like the typical PowerA controller. Does it feel higher quality though than the Switch Pro controller? That's, I think, is the big question right now. It has kind of this rubberized grip around the backing, so it does have kind of a nice feel when you're grabbing it. You do immediately notice the back buttons. You can see these macro buttons take up quite a bit of real estate on the back here. So when you go to hold on to it, I could see some accidental presses out of those, looking at how much they take up, whereas they could have been maybe a little shorter here just to stay out of the way. But I guess that's the nice thing. If you don't want them, you're supposed to be able to just pop those off just like that, and you can put them to the side. You can drop this guy on there so it kind of fills it in, and then you're good to go when it comes to those back buttons. If they are in the way or you just don't really like them. I know there are people who get like the Elite Xbox controllers just because they like the way they feel and they don't even use the back buttons. Those are completely removable as well. So I understand there are people who just don't even want to deal with the macro buttons. I also want to point out with these kind of back macro buttons here, they do appear like they are removable now that I'm looking at it. So you can kind of lift that up there and then this can slide out. So if you don't want the top ones, you can pop them off of here and just use the bottom ones, or vice versa. The buttons actually exist in here. So when you press this down, you're pressing the button down kind of at the bottom of it. And now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever really felt the need to have 4 different macro buttons on the back of my controller, especially when it becomes this crowded where you're trying to hold on to it. So I feel like I would get by just fine just having 2 of these paddles on. So you can see, for example, I removed the bottom 2 paddles and I just left the top 2 on. I think that's a good compromise for what I would use this controller for, where I can sort of still hold the bottom grips without too much issue and then still be able to press these without them really getting in the way or feeling just too crowded on the bottom. So let's talk about the feel of the controllers when it comes to the buttons and the joysticks and the D-pad. These feel very fluid. They're not as tight as the Switch first-party Pro controller. They're a little looser than, say, the Xbox Series X or Xbox One controller, in fact. The buttons here, A, B, X, and Y, are extremely stiff, and I'm noticing they're very close together. For comparison, we have the Switch first-party Pro controller here with A and Y being very far apart. Here, however, we can see all the buttons are pretty much squished together, so I feel like if you have larger hands, you would get some mispresses. In fact, you might press A and then accidentally press B or hit X at the same time, so just kind of keep that in mind. I will give a point to PowerA and their analog stick, however, compared to the Switch Pro controller. It's a little taller, and for the most part, moving around, it feels more fluid, and I think the tension's a bit better as well. The D-pad is pretty solid on this controller. It has a pivot in the middle, so you can't press all 4 directions at the same time, and it has some nice separation from the base of the controller here, so you certainly know which direction you're pressing at any time. It's not to the level of what we have with the 8-bit Do line of controllers for their D-pads, but I would say it's probably right alongside what we have with the Switch Pro controller. I'm not a fan of any of these 4 buttons here in the middle, plus, minus, snapshot, and home. For some reason, I've noticed a lot of these third parties do this with these controllers. These buttons are just so tall. They're so far off of where the controller base and the faceplate is, and I'm not really sure why they keep doing that. Like, it'd be better if this was just flush with the controller face, because like when you kind of run your thumb over it, you certainly feel like you run into the button. It's odd considering you may be used to something like this where it's much more flush and you can still kind of feel it because it has like a marking on it. Again, not sure why they keep doing this. My recommendation to PowerA would just be to kind of like shrink these down a little bit, make them kind of sink in to the faceplate itself, just more flush. The shoulder buttons, that being R, L, ZR, ZL, are fine. They press well enough, and they're far enough off to where like you're gonna get a nice click out of them when you press down. My only thing that I noticed about this is kind of strange is some of the styling on this. ZR and ZL have this weird point at the end here. I kind of feel like they could have just gone with a flattened edge and just maybe had more plastic available to press down on, but they do have a nice curve to it, so you're not gonna like slip off or anything. It's just an odd design choice. Again, I guess it's just kind of the styling they went with as it sort of follows this line here that they have. Well, I guess before we open it up, we'll try to change out the faceplate, which seems pretty straightforward. It's held down by magnets, as we saw on the back of that white faceplate when we were unboxing it, but it looks like there's kind of like a little notch here that you just kind of put a fingernail in, pop this off, and then you take the white faceplate and you line it up with the thumbsticks, and it just clicks in. It's pretty straightforward. That's probably one of the better faceplate changes that we've seen with several different controllers in the past. Usually, like I said, there's some kind of switch that you have to move to the side, or you gotta hope everything kind of lines up and clicks in. This was pretty straightforward. Also, the faceplates go a bit further than just like the styling of it, where this has a different texture than this one. This has more of a hard plastic, whereas the black has kind of a soft touch plastic. So at least there's something extra, a bit further than just, oh, this one has a different color scheme than this one. Also, like some of PowerA's other controllers, it does wake the Switch up from sleep. That seems to be kind of a coin flip with these third-party controllers, but no issues here with this one. Now there's not much left to do other than take it apart and see what's what's going on inside. Fortunately, it looks pretty straightforward, at least from the outside, to get the backing off, where there's just a bunch of Phillips head screws on the bottom, and we'll see how much further we have to go after that. All right, with a bunch of Phillips head screws out, the back just lifts off. Remember, we have some pins here for the back programmable kind of buttons, so it doesn't have to have a cable that runs from the back to the board. This will just lift off, and look at that. So here's something I noticed with this controller. It doesn't have any type of rumble. Yeah, instead they have weights here. And the idea that, obviously, if you don't have these weights, which are pretty heavy, by the way, if I just drop this, like, these are pretty sizable weights for just being in a controller. And the idea there is they want to weigh this down, right? They don't want it to feel like it's light and cheap. So they decided to put weights in. And unfortunately, instead of putting rumble motors in, that was their strategy. And you know what? It's hard to not knock them because they're missing an entire feature in general for a controller. And this is a $100 controller, and it has no rumble feature, not even like the most basic rumble. I'm not really sure why that is. And I understand there's a whole thing around having the same type of kind of advanced haptic feedback that we have in the Switch controllers, and even like the PlayStation 5 controllers. We haven't seen a third-party controller do it yet, and I'm hoping that as we go along here, now that 2 out of the 3 console manufacturers are using that technology, that type of rumble, that we will see third parties start to finally jump in with those advanced haptic feedback motors. But like, come on, PowerA. You didn't put like a basic rumble motor in here, something just to at least say, hey, this has rumble as well. I removed a couple of Phillips head screws and it lifted up pretty well here, and we can at least see where the D-pad is here, and we can grab the D-pad itself and see we do have a nice pivot, like I said, right here in the middle. It doesn't press down very easily on all 4 directions, and that makes a lot of sense kind of looking at this, and it feels very responsive. This kind of rubber membrane has a lot of tension to it, so you can really feel when you press down either direction. The analog sticks are pretty much the same ones we've been using for a long time now, and I would compare these most to something like the Xbox One or the Xbox Series joysticks. Also, we can see the antenna right up here. Good spot for it, by the way. It's not really gonna get interfered with when you're using it. It's at the top, so no issues there for that placement. We do have some good news when it comes to the charge port and the battery, both of which appear to be plug-ins and modular. So the USB-C port here has its own board that runs down and around with a ribbon cable down to the board, and then the battery we can see plugs in right there. And we can see the battery is a 900 milliamp hour at 3.7 volt. Now, looking around inside this controller, it's pretty high quality. Like, the board itself is pretty thick, not very flexible. The antenna placement's good at the top. We do have separate boards for a lot of different things, whether it's the modular pack on the back and what it connects to with those pins, that's on its own. The battery, of course, is a plug-in. The charge port is its own board. And even like the plastics on the outside are pretty thick overall. So when you do hold this controller and use it, it does have a sense of quality to it. But with all that said, I still have an issue with this controller being $100 and missing such a basic feature like rumble. It does have like motion controls, which is great. It's missing amiibo functionality, which, I mean, I don't think anyone expects controllers outside of what Nintendo makes to have amiibo support. But the fact that it's missing a basic feature like this, while seemingly kind of like shoehorning in the idea of using headphones through an audio jack that only works when the controller is plugged into the system, seems like an odd decision considering they were very aware that there was no rumble since they put weights in their place. And guys, that's gonna do it here for the Fusion controller from PowerA. Do I think this controller is worth picking up at $100? No, not really. And I mean, you can look at it and say, yeah, it's missing rumble, which is a basic feature, but also you gotta look around the marketplace. There are other controllers that are of similar quality and have more functionality at half the price even. I mean, if you look at something like the 8BitDo Pro 2 at half the price, and it has rumble and more customization to it with macro buttons, it's hard for me to tell you, hey, get the Fusion controller over that one. And then you think about the first party Pro controller from Nintendo that is at times $40 cheaper than this one. Yeah, it's just this controller is more expensive than I think it should be. If it was $40, $50, $60, yeah, it'd be a lot easier to recommend this one. But I do like the attempt by PowerA. I think it'd be really cool to have a really good kind of elite controller for the Switch that is more expensive, but also more premium feeling with all of the features and all of the bells and whistles. It just felt like here, PowerA was more interested in convincing you with the packaging and the presentation instead of the product itself. But let me know what you guys think about the Fusion controller from PowerA down below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.